The alarm on the monitor screamed before I even touched the hatchling. Her small chest had stopped rising. Blood pooled under torn wing membrane, and her tiny claws twitched once, then went still. I had exactly 90 seconds before the damage became permanent, and every second of those 90 was already running out. "Heart has stopped," said Grace Holloway, my only assistant in that cramped medical bay. Her voice stayed calm, but her hands shook as she passed me the compression tool. "Daniel, she is too small. We do not even know if her ribs can take pressure like this." "She has to take it," I said, and pressed down. I was the only human doctor on Keth Station, a research outpost built above a mining colony that belonged to a species called the Verith. Long-necked, scaled, taller than any human by twice, they trusted their own healers completely, and trusted me only because there was no one else awake that night. A cave collapse on the colony moon had crushed a nesting site, and rescue teams had pulled one surviving hatchling out of the rubble. A baby dragon, barely the size of a large dog, wings shredded, one lung caved in, heart stopped twice already before she reached my table. The Verith surgeon on duty had looked at her scans and said there was nothing more to do. Her body was too young, too fragile, her organs too different from anything they had studied. He walked away to prepare a report instead of a treatment plan. I did not walk away. "Come on," I whispered, pressing again, feeling something crack faintly under my palm. "Come on, breathe." Grace held the oxygen mask ready. Her eyes met mine for 1 second, and I saw the same fear I felt, the fear that we were about to lose a life because nobody believed a human doctor could save what a Verith surgeon had already given up on. The monitor beeped once, then again, then a third time, steady. "She is back," Grace said, breath rushing out of her. "Daniel, she is back." I did not have time to celebrate. Her lung was still collapsed, and if I did not fix it in the next few minutes, her heart would stop again, and next time, it might not restart. I had trained for years working with premature human infants, learning how to graft delicate lung tissue that could barely hold itself together. I never imagined using that same technique on a creature with scales instead of skin. But biology has patterns, even across species, and I had one shot to prove it. "Pass me the fine thread," I said, "the one we use for newborn grafts." Grace hesitated only a moment before placing it in my hand. For the next 4 hours, I worked without stopping, rebuilding torn wing membrane thread by thread, under a scope built for human eyes, not dragon anatomy. My hands ached, my vision blurred more than once. Somewhere near hour 3, her heart stopped again, and I brought her back a second time, refusing to accept what everyone else on that station had already decided was impossible. When the sun finally rose over the station's artificial horizon, the hatchling was breathing on her own, her small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, her copper-colored eyes opening for the first time since she arrived. I named her Ember, because nobody else had bothered to give her a name at all. For 3 weeks, I visited her every single day, sometimes twice, sometimes staying long after my shift ended. She grew stronger with each visit, her wings healing, her appetite returning, her small claws learning to grip the edge of my sleeve whenever I walked into the room. The other doctors on the station thought I was foolish for growing close to a patient who would one day grow larger than the shuttle bay itself. I did not care what they thought. I only cared that she was alive because I refused to give up on her. Then came the day she was declared fully recovered. Her birth colony had been located on the surface, healthy and waiting to receive her back. A transport kennel sat ready outside her recovery room, along with 2 Verith handlers assigned to escort her home. It should have been simple. It became the opposite. The moment the handlers reached for her, Ember planted all 4 feet against the floor and refused to move. She made a sound I had never heard from her before, low and sharp, nothing like her usual chirps of hunger or comfort. When they tried lifting her by force, Her whole body tensed, and the monitors on the wall spiked so violently that an alarm went off across the entire ward. "Stop," I said immediately, stepping between the handlers and her cage. "You are hurting her." "She must return to her colony," one handler said. "This delay is not acceptable." "Then give me one more minute," I said, kneeling in front of Ember. The moment I got close, her body relaxed, and she pressed her small snout into my palm, that low sound turning softer, almost content. Grace stood at the doorway, arms crossed, watching carefully. "Daniel, I think this is more than fear of strangers." She was right. Within an hour, the station's chief researcher on Verith biology, a woman named Grace's colleague, an older Verith scientist named Ordos, arrived to observe the situation herself. She studied the readings from the earlier spike, then looked at me with an expression I had not seen from any Verith before, something close to reluctant respect. "There is a bond forming," Ordos said. "In our species, a hatchling that survives a cardiac failure through outside intervention sometimes forms what we call a first bond. It is biological, not emotional, though the two often become impossible to separate. The creature identifies its rescuer as the reason for its continued life. It is rare. It is rarer still for that rescuer to be an entirely different species. So what happens if she is forced to leave anyway?" I asked. Ordos hesitated before answering. "In the wild, a hatchling separated from its first bond stops eating. Some do not survive the separation. We have never had a case involving a human. We do not know what will happen to her." I looked down at Ember, who stared back at me with those copper eyes, utterly unaware that she had just complicated every plan the station had made for her return. "Then we are not taking that risk," I said. What followed was not simple. The colony elders demanded an explanation for the delay. Station administration questioned why a junior human doctor believed she had any right to interfere with interspecies protocol. Meetings stretched across days, each one filled with arguments about biology, tradition, and territory. Some Verith officials argued that allowing a hatchling to bond with a human threatened the very structure of their culture. Others quietly admitted they had never seen a bond form so strongly, human or otherwise, and were curious what it meant. Through all of it, Ember refused to eat unless I was in the room. She refused to sleep unless I sat beside her enclosure. Every attempt to move her without me ended the same way, with alarms, distress, and handlers backing away in frustration. On the final day of hearings, I stood before the full colony council, a room of towering scaled figures who had built entire civilizations long before humans ever left their home planet. I explained everything, the surgery, the recovery, the bond that neither of us had asked for but that neither of us could ignore. Midway through my explanation, the door at the back of the chamber opened, and Grace walked in, carrying something far too large for the room. Ember had escaped her enclosure. She moved straight past the guards, past the council members, past every rule of formality that chamber had ever known, and climbed directly into my lap, knocking over 2 chairs and spilling a cup of something that hissed the moment it touched the floor. The room fell into stunned silence. Then, unexpectedly, one of the eldest council members let out a low sound that I would later learn was laughter. "It seems," the elder said, "the hatchling has already made her decision. Perhaps it is time we accepted it as well." There was no ancient word in their language for what happened between us. The closest translation they offered was something like chosen kin, a bond usually reserved for creatures that had survived the same danger together. It was not adoption in any human sense, but it was recognition, formal and binding, granting me guardianship rights over Ember until she was old enough to choose her own path. Grace hugged me the moment we left the chamber, laughing with relief. "You do realize you just became the first human guardian of a Verith dragon in recorded history." "I did not plan any of this," I said, watching Ember stretch her wings in the open corridor outside. still small compared to what she would eventually become, but healthy, strong, and undeniably alive. Months passed. Ember grew larger than any doctor's office could hold, moved to an open habitat built specially for her on the station's lower deck, and still found her way to visit me almost every morning. She would fold her enormous wings against the corridor walls, just to fit through the doorway, breathe warm air over my coffee cup until I flinched, and settle beside me while I finished my morning reports. The Verith surgeons who once dismissed her case as impossible now study my notes from that first surgery, trying to understand exactly how a technique built for human infants ended up saving a creature none of them believed could survive. I still do not have all the answers. I only know that on the night everyone else walked away, I stayed. And somewhere in that decision, a small dragon in a hospital bed decided I was worth waiting for.